All right, we're going to get started now. This is the regular monthly meeting for the Alexandria Township Land Use Board, December 16th, 2021. Notice of this meeting has been posted in the Hunterdon County Democrat and the Township website. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in accordance with Section 3D of Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Sunshine Laws. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Rochelle,
Here.
Mr. Papazian, Mr. Furchi,
Here.
Ms. Friedman,
Here.
Mr. Cannabis,
Here.
Ms. Tucker,
Here.
Mayor Gabe Plumer,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Pfefferly,
Here.
Mr. Giano,
Here.
Mr. Couch,
Here.
Mr. Kimsey,
Here.
and Mr. Hofola.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight. It's good to see so many friends and neighbors out there participating in what happens in our township. We're going to start off by taking care of some business that we have to do. First off, we're going to do the approval of the minutes for October 21st, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Sorry, who seconded? Okay.
Okay, roll call, please.
Chair Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Furchi,
Yes.
Ms. Friedman,
Yes.
Mr. Cannabis,
Yes.
Ms. Tucker,
Abstain.
Deputy Mayor Pfefferly,
Abstain.
Mayor Gabe Plumer,
Abstain.
Mr. Giano,
Yes.
Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Mr.
It
Kinsey,
is the Fritchie application, minor subdivision application withdrawal. I'll have a motion to recognize that withdrawal.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Chair Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Furchi, actually, I'm sorry, you're not eligible.
Yeah, abstain.
Ms. Friedman,
Yes.
Mr. Cannabis,
Yes.
Ms. Tucker,
Yes.
Mayor Gabe Plumer,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Pfefferly,
Yes.
Mr. Giano,
Yes.
and Mr. Couch,
Yes.
and Mr. Kinsey.
Yes.
Okay, next on the agenda is a land use ordinance discussion pertaining to the cannabis. Now, I know you're all interested in this. Let me try and explain somewhat. This is the land use board has been charged by the township committee to explore an ordinance that would be appropriate for the growing and manufacture of product in the township. I know that you all want to have your time to say something, and we want that. It's all a part of the process. So what we're going to do is we're going to initiate a discussion between the board and their professionals. I would like you to listen very closely because some of your concerns and questions may be answered during the course of this discussion. I expect this discussion is going to go on for about an hour. At the end of 1 hour, we're going to open it up to public comment and hear what you guys have to say about it. When we get to that point, we're going to limit it to 3 minutes per person because there's a lot of people that want to voice their opinions and comments on this. And so we're going to be 3 minutes each. At the end of an hour, we're going to go back into our regular meeting and finish it up in the last 15 minutes. Now keep in mind that the school, it requires us to leave here by 10 o'clock. So if we can be efficient at your comments and everything, it will afford everybody a chance to speak. Okay, on that now, the creation of an ordinance is a complicated thing and it requires a lot of thought and discussion. I'm going to hand it off to the planner, David Banish, to give an explanation of what we're going to do here in the procedure that is with that.
Phil, before you do that, I'll recuse myself.
For the record, Mr. Fritchie's recusing himself. David?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening, and to the public, good evening. I'm going to make a series of comments here. I'm going to describe the process as we understand it at this point. I'm going to give some background information on marijuana-related regulations in the township, some additional background information on some state rulings that have to do with marijuana cultivation, medical marijuana cultivation. I'm going to talk about some general considerations that the board should give some thought to regarding the formulation of an ordinance. And I'm going to talk about some existing regulations in the township's industrial and manufacturing zones. And I'm also going to talk about environmental standards that already exist in the ordinance that apply to all land uses in the township, irrespective of the zone in which they're located. Because the township does have a series of standards to protect essentially community character, the quality of life in the community, and the environmental resources that we all know Alexandria Township is rich in. So for now, I'm going to start off with a brief explanation of the process so that you all understand what's about to happen in front of you. The process in this situation is going to involve the following procedures. The first of which, where we are this evening, is for the Land Use Board to consider, prepare, and recommend regulations concerning cannabis uses in Alexandria Township. Then once this process concludes, the Land Use Board formulates its recommendations for regulations for cannabis uses. It will refer its recommendation and a draft ordinance, presumably with those regulations, to the Township Committee for the committee to consider whether those recommendations should be implemented and adopted. The Land Use Board makes a recommendation to the Township Committee for ordinance regulations. The Land Use Board does not itself adopt ordinance regulations that would permit a land use such as cannabis or medical marijuana cultivation. This is up to the Township Committee after this process concludes. Now, when I say the board is going to consider, prepare, and recommend regulations concerning cannabis uses in Alexandria Township, that may or may not conclude this evening. In other words, it may go to another meeting. Presumably, that will be the January meeting if it does extend to another meeting. So after the Township Committee considers the Land Use Board recommendations, if the Township Committee so chooses, then the committee would introduce ordinance amendments at one of its regular meetings. Once an ordinance amendment is introduced by the Township Committee having to do with land use regulation, the committee is then required by the municipal land use law and those procedures to refer the ordinance back to the Land Use Board for what's called a master plan consistency determination and recommendation. So it comes back to the board at that point, and then the Land Use Board will then review the draft ordinance amendment that's been introduced. It'll make its master plan consistency determination as to whether the proposed ordinance is consistent or inconsistent with Alexandria Township's master plan. That recommendation will then go back to the governing body, and once the governing body receives the Land Use Board master plan consistency determination, then the Township Committee will hold a public hearing. They will accept public comment at the hearing, and ultimately they will vote on the proposed ordinance amendment regulating cannabis uses in Alexandria Township. So this is a fairly lengthy process. It's driven by procedures that are required under the law, and this is the outset of that process. I want to talk about the Township Committee's expectations of the Land Use Board. The Township Committee adopted Resolution 2021-117 on November 8th, 2021, in which the committee, quote, requests the Land Use Board to move forward with the preparation and recommendation of suitable land use ordinances to regulate cannabis uses and facilities within the Township of Alexandria. This request from the Township Committee comes in response to private sector interest to establish a medical marijuana cultivation facility in Alexandria Township. So that's the order of business that this Land Use Board will be endeavoring to address this evening. Now, brief background on marijuana-related land use regulation in Alexandria Township. On July 14, 2021, the Township Committee adopted ordinance number 2021-6 that established township regulations prohibiting all classes of cannabis businesses pursuant to Section 31B of the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Enforcement Assistance and Marketplace Modernization Act. That act required all municipalities in New Jersey to adopt regulations pertaining to recreational cannabis production and consumer consumption. If the governing body had not acted in response to the requirements of that statute, the township would have forfeited the right to regulate recreational cannabis uses for a period of 5 years, during which the growing, cultivating, manufacturing, selling, and reselling of cannabis and cannabis items would be permitted in all industrial zones. And the retail selling of cannabis items to consumers would be a conditional use in all commercial and retail zones. That is not the case because in July, the Township Committee took action that prohibited all cannabis-related uses under the recreational marijuana law. The Township Committee responded to the requirements of the Act by prohibiting the following specific uses: cultivation, manufacture, wholesale uses, distribution, retail sales, and delivery service businesses located within the township that would provide courier services for consumer purchase. For the board considerations to address the Township Committee's request as pertains to this medical marijuana cultivation question that the committee's referred to it, I suggest that the board basically follow or consider the following several questions, and I'll just lay that out. Number one, should the municipal ordinance differentiate between medical marijuana cultivation and recreational cannabis cultivation, which is currently prohibited in Alexandria Township? Number two, if the board decides that medical marijuana cultivation should be permitted in the township, the board should determine where the use should be permitted. In other words, in which zoning districts should medical marijuana cultivation be permitted? Number three, if the board decides that medical marijuana cultivation should not be permitted in some or all of the township zoning district, then the board's recommendation to the Township Committee should reflect that, obviously. Number four, if the board decides that the medical marijuana cultivation should be permitted in one or more of the township zoning districts, then zoning standards will be needed to guide the future development of land use for medical marijuana cultivation in Alexandria Township. So I would expect that, Mr. Chairman, once we get to that point and I finish with my introductory remarks, I'll repeat that process again. But it seems like a logical way to approach this question for the board's discussion this evening. Now, in terms of medical marijuana cultivation, this has been around and legalized in New Jersey actually for some time. Back in 2011, the New Jersey Department of Agriculture determined that medical marijuana cultivation is a crop in New Jersey. In March 2012, the State Agricultural Development Committee, or the SADC, published their newsletter entitled New Jersey Farmland Conservation Connections, New Jersey Farmland Preservation Connections. And they published the following clarification on medical marijuana as it pertains to preserved farms and right to farm protection. Quote, clarification issued regarding medical marijuana on farms. In response to inquiries, the SADC in December provided clarification on medical marijuana as it pertains to preserved farms and right to farm protection. The New Jersey Department of Agriculture determined that medical marijuana is a crop based on New Jersey statutes. Therefore, medical marijuana may be grown and processed on preserved farms. However, because it is prohibited at the federal level, the Natural Resource Conservation Service's position is that it will not permit medical marijuana on farms that were preserved using the Federal Farm and Ranch Lands Protection Program funding. Now, that's not all preserved farms get that funding. Some of the funding is simply or strictly state funding and would not be subject to the National Resource Conservation Service's position. However, that said, Medical marijuana cannot be sold or distributed from a preserved farm because distribution is tightly controlled and dispensary sites will function not as farm markets, but rather as medical treatment facilities. Now, the part I think that pertains directly to us is this one. Medical marijuana growing operations are not eligible for right to farm protection because the Right to Farm Act requires conformance with all relevant federal laws, as well as state laws. Therefore, close quote, medical marijuana cultivation is not afforded right to farm protection, as is all other agricultural land use in Alexandria Township. And that's because the cultivation does not conform to all relevant federal laws. Mr. Chairman, with respect to a few land use considerations for medical marijuana, I'd like to just recite a few. First of all, it will be cultivated within a secure enclosed building, and it will likely be hydroponic cultivation relying on a continuous water supply. It is required to maintain man security 24/7, 365 days a year. Indoor cultivation should be expected to require a secure building that resembles a big box or big box construction with a 6 foot to 8 foot high fence compound that surrounds it. It's obviously going to generate traffic. There's going to be traffic from employees and there's going to be truck traffic supporting the use itself. There's going to be light. The light's going to be associated with the security needs for this facility. It will be lit overnight, continuously. There's likely to be some noise associated with the HVAC equipment and the other mechanical systems, such as for odor control. Odor itself is a concern. It's commonly associated with the cultivation and the drying of the crop. There remains uncertainty as to whether odors emitted from this use can be managed with no impact on nearby land uses. Water consumption would rely on groundwater resources, as is the case in the vast majority of Alexandria Township, so it will require its own water supply. Wastewater generation and potential impacts on groundwater quality are something that should be investigated at some point. They're unknown at this point. And of course, there are a range of uses related to the situation of the use itself. Setbacks to residential use. In Alexandria Township, single-family dwellings are the predominant land use. Lot size considerations, building size, building height, things of that nature, maximum coverage standards. But these are the type of impacts and considerations that are commonly associated with industrial, manufacturing, and production land uses. At least a number of them are. And Mr. Chairman, in Alexandria Township, industrial and manufacturing is a permitted use. Alexandria Township's land use ordinance permits industrial, manufacturing, and production uses under the G1 manufacturing subcategory of industrial land use in the ordinance. It's found in section 115.22, entitled the G1 manufacturing use. It is permitted only in the IC, or the industrial commercial district, and that is found and located on the southwest side of Alexandria Township. It is situated along the Milford Frenchtown Road, which is County Route 519. All land in the IC zone is situated with frontage on the county road. I bring this to your attention because I think many of the perceived impacts associated with marijuana cultivation are similar to the types of impacts that the community could expect from industrial and manufacturing uses. So the ordinance sets out for the IC zone the permitted use under industrial uses, the G1 manufacturing. And it states manufacturing uses shall include but not be limited to the production, processing, cleaning, and testing of materials, goods, foodstuffs, and products, provided that, and then there's a parking standard for that use. And that's the other. However, the industrial commercial IC zone is the only zoning district in Alexandria Township that permits the G1 manufacturing use. No other zoning district permits that use. It's important to understand that the ordinance has been around for a while, and Alexandria Township's land use ordinance includes community character and environmental protection standards that pertain to all land use in Alexandria Township. There are standards for the protection of the environment, character of the municipality, and to prevent unwanted and nuisance impacts on the community. They're found in section 115.28 of the ordinance, and they apply to all uses in Alexandria Township. I'm going to touch on just a few. The ordinance states, no use shall be permitted which is noxious or offensive in the immediate surrounding areas by reason of odor, dust, smoke, gas, vibration, illumination, or noise, or which constitutes a public hazard. The operation shall not constitute any nuisance whatsoever beyond the boundary of the site on which the use is located by reason of dissemination of, there's a long list, but odors is included among them. So the ordinance prevents, or current standards in the ordinance, currently prevents uses that emit odors beyond the boundary of the site. The operation shall not produce objectionable glare beyond the property line. The operation shall not create any other objectionable condition in an adjoining area which will endanger public health or safety or be detrimental to the proper use of the surrounding area. And then there are specific requirements for commercial and industrial uses. And I'm going to quote a couple. All activities shall be operated in such a manner as to comply with applicable performance standards that are included in the ordinance governing noise, smoke, particulate matter, toxic and noxious matter, odors, fire and explosive hazards, vibration, glare, or heat for the district in which such use shall be located. Then there's a noise standard. All activities shall be operated in such a manner as to comply with applicable state noise standards. There's an odor standard. There shall be no emission of odorous gases or other odorous matter in such quantities as to be offensive at any point on or beyond the lot boundary within which the industrial operation is situated. Any process which may involve the creation or emission of any odors shall be provided with a secondary safeguard system in order that control will be maintained if the primary safeguard system should fail. So the ordinance already contains performance standards and protection of the environmental protection standards and standards that are designed to limit impacts of adjoining land uses on one another. All that said, however, Mr. Chairman, our recommendation is that the board begin its discussion as I outlined earlier, and that's on the medical marijuana cultivation regulations as follows. Number one, should the municipal ordinance differentiate between medical marijuana cultivation and recreational cannabis cultivations, which are currently prohibited in Alexandria Township? Number two, if the board decides that medical marijuana cultivation should be permitted in the township, the board should determine where the use should be permitted. That is, in which zoning districts should medical marijuana cultivation be permitted. Number three, if the board decides that medical marijuana cultivation should not be permitted in some or all of the township zoning districts, the board's recommendation to the township committee should reflect that. And number four, if the board decides that medical marijuana cultivation should be permitted in one or more of the township zoning districts, then zoning standards are going to be needed to guide the future development and use of land for medical marijuana cultivation in Alexandria Township. I'd like to just conclude there, and if the board has any comments, questions, I'd be happy to take them, unless you'd like to begin the discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it. As I said, you can tell just from what David just went through, there's a lot to consider. So it seems to me that whether or not we're going to allow this in the town needs to be thought out carefully, and the best approach that I see is for us to first look at where it's an appropriate use in the town. David spoke of the IC zone down along the county road. We need to first decide. Guys, this is a process. Please respect the board. All right, so let's start off the discussion.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make one quick correction for the record? He stated 519 as the industrial zone.
619.
619.
Thank you.
Correct the record.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer.
So noted.
I apologize for that. No, thank you.
All right, so the discussion has to start somewhere. Where we end up is going to be a function of looking at all of the different factors, including what you guys have to say to us during the public comment thing. Don't assume anything. So I've asked the board, let's start to take a look at it. Does anybody have any questions for David or comments on their thoughts on an appropriate location or an appropriate zone to have such an operation?
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask just a couple of clarifying questions to David, just to make sure that we fully understand it, so that the members of the public also understand it. First of all, the township did not opt out. What was the default action required by the state for doing so? So if we did not opt out, what were the permitted zones that the state would have forced on the township?
Retail sales as a conditional use in any commercial district. And there were a variety of other uses, which I would just like to go to my list, Mr. Mayor, if you give me just a second, that included cultivation, manufacture, wholesale sales, and distribution would be a permitted use in any industrial zone, in any municipality.
So the state's default position for this type of use is an industrial zone?
Yes, it is.
So can we, in some ways, almost view that as a recommendation from the state?
I would suggest you consider it as a legislative determination, rather than a recommendation.
Understood. And in the industrial zone, you mentioned the nuisance ordinance and the restrictions on things like odor escaping beyond the lot lines of a particular property. That would be applicable in the industrial zone, correct?
Yes, it would. And those standards apply in the industrial zone and any of the other municipal zoning districts for any other use in the township.
Thank you, David. Mr. Chairman, I would just offer my comments. If, depending on what the question is before the board currently, as we go through this process, if the question is where could it possibly be located, if it were to be located anywhere in the township, it would seem that there's a basis here created by the state and many of the other things that David just went over for ourselves and the public, that the only possible place for this would be the industrial zone in Alexandria. And that's a big if, as outlined in the nuisance ordinance that was just mentioned by David, because there are many concerns with this type of activity that could adversely impact many of the other properties in the industrial zone, as well as, we look at this map in terms of Alexandria Township, but obviously on both ends of that industrial zone are two densely populated areas, Milford Borough and Frenchtown Borough as well. So depending on what the question is, my comments would be the industrial zone, if we need to pick a zone at all, and then discuss whether or not it's permitted there.
Okay, anyone else on the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pepper.
So, following up to the mayor's comments, I guess my one question, David, is on the 5-year window that you mentioned, that the town has the ability to put these ordinances in place. What would happen at the end of that 5 years that the state has stipulated? Is it just, is something change within the town? Is the state going to allow it anywhere? Is there, if we don't combine these two and say, treat them the same, medical and recreational, after that 5-year period, is there any language in there on what happens after the 5 years?
Not so far as I'm aware, except that the municipality has to address this again in 5 years to determine whether or not it remains a prohibited use. However, any time during the 5 years, if the municipality changes its mind with respect to the recreational marijuana uses, I believe the ordinance can be amended after 1 year. The comment combination of the two uses as one, I think doesn't happen automatically ever in the absence of municipal legislative action. So in other words, I don't think that if the municipality were to permit medical marijuana cultivation, that someday that would magically become recreational marijuana cultivation, unless there's a legislative action by the township committee to that effect.
So I guess to that effect, if I'm the business owner, if I'm a medical processor already, and I have the ability to go to recreational, I'm going to apply for both licenses, right? Or when I have that opportunity, I'm going to try to get both licenses since I have the facility. So to answer your first question from me, do we consider these together? My answer would be yes, because we don't want to come back in 5 years and have this debate again. I think this needs to be considered for, everything that we decide what direction this town goes. Whether it's in the industrial zone, and I would agree with the mayor that if we were to pick one, if any, that would be the area to go. My second question would be, due to the water usage and the heavy water usage, can you require that and the discharge of that water, which, from my understanding, from my discussions with people, obviously not having professionals in here yet, not sure that level of quality of water going back into our aquifer is. Can we require somebody in the industrial zone to have public water and public sewer that can treat that going back into the system? Or is that not something that we can require since we don't offer it as part of our services within the town?
You can require it. I believe, Mr. Pfefferly, that you can require that the use be supported by public water and public sewer. It would obviously have to be provided, if it were to be permitted in the IC zone, by one of the boroughs, because as you point out, the municipality doesn't have a public water supply system. So, but yes, you could put that as one of the standards attached to the permitted use, should you choose to permit it in the IC zone, I believe it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for David. What is the physical difference, the product difference between medical and recreational marijuana? I mean, is the plant different? Is the strain different? Is the genetic difference? Or is it just?
I just have to say, I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Gino. I just don't know. I mean, I know that the state sets standards for the THC content on marijuana grown, but I have no idea whether there are different strains of the plant or anything about the particulars of the cannabis that's grown.
So it's fair to say that the difference is a legislative one, probably, and whatever the state is trying to encourage one way or the other, I don't think physically, all the issues that you brought up environmentally, zoning wise, so forth and so on. My perspective, Mr. Chairman, David's 4 points, I don't think the number one point is really one to be concerned with at this stage, but certainly the number 2 point, whatever zoning comes into, and clearly the only possible zone that we could even consider, forgetting even the environmental constraints at this point, would be the IC zone along 619 along the river. That's just my opinion at this stage.
Thank you, Mike. Who's next?
Just wanted to also kind of piggyback on what the committee effectively commented on. Is another potential concern is that our industrial zone does back up to the Delaware River. So, in that case, can we go, further in our requirements or concerns about wastewater, about water usage, about anything that's going to come out of this plant? Because it is going to sit right on the Delaware River, which also, aside from being, why most of us live, part of why we all live out here, but that's also the water supply for, much of the area.
I can't think of another standard beyond requiring public water and sewer. A public sewer would obviously address the treatment issues involved, and the sewage treatment plant's discharged to the river currently. As I understand it, Frenchtown's plant is fairly new, modern technology, and discharges much higher water quality than it did in the past. But I think we would rely on the public wastewater treatment collection system there, if it were to be permitted.
Jim?
Dave, I have a question about whether our ordinance can separate the cultivation, the processing, and the sales and distribution of medical marijuana. I don't know whether they're necessarily married. You have to do all three in one spot, or whether we could say cultivation is one step in the process. From there, it could go, and wherever it goes, for processing.
I think in terms of your ability to regulate each of the three aspects of the use, cultivation, manufacture, and then distribution, you can regulate each of the three individually. My understanding is that at least one of the private sector interests has obtained approval for a license to conduct all three uses, but had no intention to do so in Alexandria Township, as I understand it. But I do believe that you can regulate the three uses separately.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jude.
So from what I have heard, even though there may be a difference in plants, medical or recreational, it seems to me that the growing facility is probably the same. And so from everything that I've heard here, with regard to odor, water, and the impact, it's clear to me that the only zone this could be in, if we even allow it, would be the industrial zone. And that would be my opinion.
No other questions for David or further discussion from the board? I tend to agree. My position is that, it's quite obvious. We have an industrial zone for a reason. We have an agricultural zone for a reason. And we have these things set up to control so that the appropriate use gets put into the appropriate place. Taking that into consideration, in addition to that, the pipes in the ground to me mean a lot. I don't know how much water this use is going to take, and I don't know what is incorporated into their discharge. I don't know that that can be really determined and what effect it would have on the aquifer. We've got the issues of the odor and everything, but it's just screaming to me that if, and that's a big if it is going to be allowed in this township, we'll come to that conclusion at the end. But if it is to be allowed in this town, I believe it should be restricted to the IC only. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, will we be taking a vote?
I think at this time, before we entertain a straw poll probably at this point, but I think that I'd like to hear from the public. Who knows, there may be some proponents out there that are going to enlighten us as to, what we should do. But seriously, I do want to hear from the public before we make any preliminary decisions. The final decision wouldn't happen until the January meeting. Before we get to to say that the general sense of the board is that if it was going to be allowed anywhere, it would be in the IC zone.
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed.
Very good, so.
No, just to
I don't
clarify, we're talking.
One at a time, guys.
Just to clarify, we're talking about combining recreational and medical in the statement, treating them the same. Because I agree with Judy that. It's on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I want to just clarify that we're talking about both medical and recreational marijuana now in that statement that we just made. And I agree with Judy that for our purposes and considering all the impacts of such an operation, it really doesn't matter once a plant is built where that marijuana is going. They're all going to look pretty much the same. They're going to have the same issues, the same concerns. Anyway, so I just want to clarify that.
Thanks, Dennis, and I tend to agree. I don't see, any delineation as far as the effects on our community, so I think that we should look at this ordinance as covering both medical and recreational use.
Hey, Bill?
Yes, sir.
I maintain that the cultivation and the processing are two totally separate things. I grow corn, I don't turn it into cornflakes. And I think there are the cultivation, not the processing, but the cultivation, as far as everything I understand, wouldn't be much different than a greenhouse growing flowers or tomatoes. I may be wrong on that, I don't know.
Sir, I'm sorry, can you state your name? I'm sorry, I missed your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, my name's Jim Couch.
Okay, thank you.
So, what I'm saying is, we may need some more input from someone that knows more about this sort of thing. But I think the cultivation could easily take place in an agricultural district.
Okay, well, and I think it's important to understand that this, from my understanding, the way this crop is grown, it's not grown out like corn in the field. It's grown in an indoor structure hydroponically, which means there's not even dirt involved. So what we're really talking about is a very large building and nothing being grown outside of that building. So the building is for growing, from my understanding, I'm not a professional on the matter, but it's not only for processing, but it is in fact where they would grow the product. And the way that works, the way I see it, is that that's going to require a lot of water, a lot more water than your corn would require, because your corn is going to be satisfied by the rain. All of the water that would be used in this operation would be taken from the aquifer or from the public water system. Does that help?
I had a neighbor that grew tomatoes hydroponically. He just drew some water from the creek. Didn't take that much. Now, we're talking about something that none of us know for sure. So this is the sort of thing that we really need to get some kind of expert to explain to us. Like, you're assuming it's going to take a ton of water. It may not.
Okay, well, if, guys, please, we're almost to the point where you're going to get to voice your opinion. Depending on where the board, what the board decides to do with this ordinance, if it was going to be let's say in the AR zone, then it would be required that we would have to do hydraulic studies and everything like that. Professionals would come in. We're not getting that deep into the weeds at it right now. We're just trying to determine whether or not we're going to allow it in all zones, one zone, or possibly even not at all. Anything else from the board? Mr. Kinsey?
As far as, from what I understand, the facility in White House, I mean, basically it doesn't look like there's any farming activity at all. It looks more like a factory. So to say this is an agricultural operation seems a bit of a stretch to me. So if it's more like a factory, it seems that it should definitely be in the IC zone, as far as I'm concerned. And I know a lot of people have discussed the water situation. One of the other things that was mentioned at the township meeting by one of the participants giving their opinion, they talked about the power. Now I know the electrician that worked on the facility in White House said that has more power than your average hospital. So that's another concern. Where's that going to come from? How's that going to be? So just another thing to think about.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify Jim's question about a crop, I believe the SADZ allows it to be grown as a fiber plant, and I believe that's as far as it goes. That's what they allow. To grow like any other row crop, but only for fiber.
And you would be referring to the production of hemp, not
Yes.
not cannabis,
Yes,
or
hemp.
marijuana,
Yes.
or medical use.
Yes, and once the THC level or whatever that is reaches a certain content, the crop has to be destroyed. It can't even be used for profit.
Interesting, thank you, Brent. Any further discussion? Okay, at this time, we're getting ready to open up for the public comments. As I said in the beginning, we have a lot of people that want to make comments, and I want to hear everybody's comment. You know, contrary to what, you know, some of the rumors and everything going around, I live in this town. I've been here for 36 years, and I love this town. And I don't want anything to be done wrong in this town. Our town's great. Part of the reason our town is great because of all of these people that volunteer their time every month to come down and sit through some pretty boring stuff. But we're there every single month. And it's because of that we have a town that's running as well as it is and as pretty as it is. And I just want to ask everybody just to have faith. Don't make assumptions. I understand that, you know, this is a very emotional thing, but let's just let the process work out and have faith that we're going to do the right thing this time, whatever that might be. All right, so again, we're going to open it up for 3 minutes per person. And keep in mind that we need to try and get done before the time constraints of the school, so I don't want to say make it quick, but make it quick. To speak, we're going to call the names out in the order that they're on the list. You come before the podium here, and you can see you got to get pretty close to the mic to be able to be heard. So let's start with that right now.
Okay, so the first name I have is Ethan Holt.
Hi, my name's Ethan Hull, 361 Macklin Corner. To answer Mr. Pouch's question, most of our neighbors have passed ordinances at this point, do classify it as industrial. They actually go further to classify it as industrial 2. Main reason for industrial 2 It's intense by nature, and it presents compatibility issues to other residents or businesses or adjacent properties, however you want to classify that. Phillips classifies it as an I2. Hoboken, I2. Newark, actually, as you are suggesting, breaks it apart into separate entities, like the cultivation is I3, I2, I1. Manufacturing, I3, I2, I1. No one classifies it as industrial in the presence, unless you are doing hemp, as Mr. pointed out. And then, if I could just go to the draft ordinance, that's actually what we've been presented so far. The 400 foot from a dwelling, I struggled to find a single ordinance. I searched, I used a tool that lets me search millions of ordinances throughout the entire country. I did not find a single ordinance that goes from the building to a dwelling. I can't find that. So I don't know who came up with that or where that came from, but everything is from the building to a property line in any case. And that's in most legal things also. It's like take sex offenders. Property line to school, not the homeroom. You know, it doesn't go from, you know, normally when you dictate something like that, it's a similar thing and a similar thing. A bar can't be 400 feet from a bar. Not, you know, a bar and 400 feet from a homeroom. It's 400 feet from the school, the property line. So that's an important distinction that I think is lacking. And I'm sure I'm probably over on time at this point. One more quick point about the water recovery. The water recovery for magnesium electron, one of our neighbors over in Kingwood, they actually are required to collect all used water and ship it out to Trenton. So that could be something that you guys could explore also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to just interrupt you guys for a minute and you refer to a draft ordinance. We're starting off completely fresh here. So,
I would appreciate that.
yeah, and I'm sorry, but you know, at one point we had looked at some things and we're starting off fresh. Everything has changed, so please just ignore that. It's not relevant at this point.
Okay, I'm actually gonna call two names so that the second name can wait. So next is Corey Garrett. And the name after that is Daria Wasserback.
Hi, I'm Corey Garrett. I live at 2 Dark Hollow Lane in the Township. And I've been very active this week in trying to put together information. I didn't know anything about any kind of marijuana processing, cultivation, anything of the sort. And so I created for myself a notebook, and I actually duplicated it for the committee that has a bunch of information that I referred to in a petition that I put around town. I'm sure you guys probably know about it. But the petition speaks to many of the things that were brought up by Mr. Banish. The concerns are valid, and they're supported by what's just emerging research at this point. With the federal government not okaying this type of production across the country, there's not a lot of federally supported research. And so we do have emerging research that talks to all of the things that you talked about. Because you talked about it, I'm just going to jump to some other things. Well, first of all, let me talk about the petition. The people behind me have been amazing in their response to this threat to our community. That's how I see it. They have come in force, and really, I'm so impressed. We have over 800 signatures. I think we're about 850 at this point. And I think the attendance here today speaks to this as well. Now, I live close to the zone that would have been Lot 1063, which I think the board is now saying they're not interested in that spot. but I would raise caution about the Crown Papers Superfund site that I believe is somewhere near the zone that we're talking about. I'm sorry. And so I just wanted to raise a caution flag about how that is addressed, how we look at it. It is part of the township and it will impact us greatly. I think that my time might be out, so I don't want to take more time. But I do have a lot of information in here if you have any questions about the petition. Thank you.
After Daria is Michael Muller.
So good evening, my name is Daria Wasserback and I reside at 87 Mount Salem Road in Alexandria. I am obliged to disclose that I'm not here in my professional capacity as the superintendent of Delaware Valley Regional High School, and I'm in no way speaking on behalf of the district, Board of Education, or staff, speaking solely as a 30-plus year resident of the township. I must say I certainly appreciate the information that was shared this evening. It was very helpful to me, and I appreciate the thoughtful questions and comments that were asked by the board. A lot of them were very reflective of the concerns shared by the community, so I wanted to say I appreciate that. I am blessed to both live and work here. Each day I make a 3-mile commute and I enjoy the beautiful views and the silos and the barns. I actually pass a winery and horses, and if I time it right, I get to enjoy those spectacular sunsets. The only traffic I encounter is caused by the crossing of a line of ducks, geese, or wild turkeys. This is our Alexandria Township. We have wonderful neighbors, we wave to strangers who drive down our street, we look out for one another. Families have farmed here for generations. We know our firefighters and our EMTs, and it's an idyllic community. Unfortunately, this may lead outsiders to underestimate us or consider us simple, and I feel as if Hunterdon County in particular has been targeted. They obviously do not know who we are. From an article published by NewJersey.com, the president of the New Jersey Cannabis Association states, "The greenhouse absolutely fits the character of our municipality. So it's not like you'd be changing or altering the character of your community by allowing greenhouses. It's all agricultural." Chuckling, he also added that the non-urban nature of Hunterdon County means that there's fewer neighbors to worry about. To that, I would reply, we know better. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness. We will continue to come out in droves in opposition. There is simply too much at stake. I know that all of you love this community too. So please do not open the door to a manufacturing plant, as one will undoubtedly lead to more. Our landscape will be forever changed. We don't want to leave a legacy such as that for our generations to come. I implore you to abandon this project, and I thank you for your time.
And then after Michael, Ed Schultz.
Hi, my name is Michael Mahler. I live on 1772 County Road 519. Quickly, Mr. House, no disrespect. One big difference I can state with your comparison between tomatoes and marijuana plants is I'm pretty sure that your neighbor didn't hire armed guards to guard those tomatoes. Just want to give you a quick idea of what it's like to grow up here. My father moved us out here in 1974 from South Plainfield. He flew us here on one of the 2 planes that he built. The second plane he built right in Pittstown on Mount Salem Road where I was raised. I was young, but I do remember the landscape of South Plainfield, and I understand why Dad chose here for his family. Our property was bordered by Francophone cornfields. We had the Riley's Wildlife Preserve below us. We had Jim Leckner's horse farms across the street. It is Americana town. This town is a family of generations. The town grew like every town did, and we even have Aaron Pagesian to thank for a lot of the beautiful towns that were built, and a lot of families here don't even probably realize that we built. Growing up, we could ride safely to our school, we could ride safely to afternoon jobs, we could walk through nearest fields to families, to friends. When my father passed away, my mother told me excited that she's actually selling her house when she moved to Virginia to a young lady that I grew up with. And she now joined the generation because we both grew up here in the same atmosphere I did. My younger son had the opportunity to hunt property like my father did. My older son, he had the privilege to work on handicap horse farm, helping handicapped kids now call dreams come true. So after all these years, not much has really changed. Certainly not the community, we're all here. People don't come here in the excitement for a medical marijuana plant. They come here for the ideals that I talked about. So if you allow this excuse of an agriculture to come here, you condemn us. You let this factory here destroy the Americana here. You choose our town for this, and you're responsible for the demise of what generations have built. I oppose this factory in our town.
And after that is Jana Lee Olsick.
Hello, my name is Ed Choke. I live at 16 Alexandria Drive. I first want to thank Mr. Manish for the information that he pulled together. It was very informative. This meeting's actually a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. I see everybody talking about it, and the gut feeling is that the land board is doing the right thing. I'm trusting in the process. Hopefully, not just the industrial area, but not at all in our township. My only hope is that the land board does the correct recommendation and that the township then listens to them and follows what they say. Thank you.
After Jana Lee is Elizabeth Strupchak.
Good evening. My name is Jana Lee Olsick, and I live at 1 Vanderbilt Road in Alexandria Township. I'm here today to inform you about my opposition to the proposed cannabis facility. It is my understanding that this facility is planned to be constructed at 26 Airport Road. I want to be clear that I oppose the approval of the cannabis growing and processing facility in that location and any other location in our township. The residents who have assembled here tonight have come to express their deep concerns about the impact of this facility on our shared air, water, and soil. We are exercising our civil right to protest township actions that may lead to the approval of growing and processing cannabis within our borders. This facility, if built, will be located within 1.4 miles from Alexandria Middle School. Indoor cannabis cultivation operations use carbon dioxide generators to accelerate plant growth. Two common methods used to generate CO2 are fermentation and combustion. Fermentation creates CO2, hydrogen, methane, and other air contaminants. Combustion generates carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and VOCs. If used in significant quantities, the emissions of these air contaminants may pose public health risks. Has the Land Use Board considered the negative impact on both indoor and outdoor air quality of the school? Has the board considered how poor air quality will impact children with chronic respiratory diseases? Has the board considered the impact of poor air quality on the ability of children to learn? Cannabis processing operations convert the cannabis plant into usable products. These operations typically use solvents to extract essential oils from the plant. Chemicals such as carbon monoxide, propane, butane, and supercritical CO2 can be used to enhance oil recovery from cannabis. For processors, the potential for fire is the primary source of risk. Butane, a highly combustible gas, is often used to extract the plant's oil, and if not handled properly, explosions can happen and lead to fires, as has occurred in several publicized incidents across the country. What considerations has this board made in regards to the threat of explosions caused by the facility's use of chemical solvents during the process of extracting oil from cannabis? Does the fact that our township lacks a fire department complicate meeting the requirements of the National Fire and Protection Association in regards to facilities that house and use these solvents? Lastly, if not properly managed, the solvents and chemicals used in essential oil extraction will end up in wastewater streams or storm water runoff. The pollutants in the wastewater have the potential to impact drinking water sources and damage septic systems. How will this board protect our wetlands? For the sake of our shared air, water, and soil, I implore this board to do what is necessary to ensure that cannabis growing and processing facilities will never be able to threaten the lives of Alexandria residents and the health of our fragile ecosystem. Thank you.
And after that is Carla Comendola.
How you doing? Elizabeth Sturchak, 1 Indian Creek Road. The state of New Jersey has an administrative code which specifically states that no person shall cause, suffer, allow, or permit to be emitted into the outdoor atmospheres substances and quantities which shall result in air pollution as defined herein. That definition includes the presence in the outdoor atmosphere of one or more air contaminants in quantities and duration as are or tend to be injurious to human health, welfare, animal, plant life, or property, or would unreasonably interfere with the enjoyment of life or property throughout the state. The New Jersey Administrative Code does not effectively regulate odor issues. I have personal first-hand experience with that. If that's the case, a township ordinance will also not provide that. Air pollution, odor specifically, are very subjective. I'm not sure how an ordinance or who would even regulate that. Once this facility goes in, no ordinance, administrative code, or statute can remedy any odor problems, and they will be a problem. It will prevent you from opening your windows, sitting in your yard, gardening, going for a walk. Some of the physical effects would include headaches, respiratory distress, cardiovascular distress, and nausea. You can have a state-of-the-art air pollution control device, but if you don't operate it to its potential, then it hardly serves its purpose. Growing and processing cannabis produces volatile organic compounds from both the terpenes in the plants and from the solvents used during the extraction. There's a very high potential for this facility to emit upwards of 50 tons per year of VOC emissions. As mentioned earlier, the energy for lighting, HVAC, and water use is expensive. Somebody was asking about how much water could potentially be used, and from what I've read, it's upwards of 100,000 gallons per day. There will be large boilers. They need to provide the heat. Those boilers would operate most likely on number 2 heating fuel oil. We don't have a municipal water supply, as mentioned earlier, and Alexandria often has power outages. This will therefore also require the use of large emergency generators, much larger than what we would use at home. As mentioned earlier, the VOC potentials and the emissions from combustion sources such as boilers and generators create other air pollutants such as nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, carbon monoxide. The VOCs used are generated in the process do react with nitrogen oxide and produce ground level ozone. This can generate upwards of 2,000 metric tons of ozone per year just in our little area. Other problems would be wastewater. Where are they going to discharge to? Hazardous waste. There will likely be large quantity amounts of hazardous waste. That includes the solvent extraction, organic peroxides, any bad batches, expired materials, the plant waste if they're soaked in solvents. You're going to have universal waste, you're going to have lamps, ballasts, batteries, pesticides. How is any of that going to be regulated?
Excuse me. The time is up for your comments. I apologize. We have a limit of 3, and so only.
at it all. I mean, you're gonna
I'm
have
interested in what you're saying.
potential spills, loud fans, and everybody else was much longer than me. And you have a trout stream through the area if it were to go in the other spot. My last statement really is, you know, even though your draft ordinance is no longer valid, you did state that this township desires to maintain an agricultural production and processing that is compatible with this township's land-based and existing rural residential community character. This is not part of what Alexandria is. It's a residential community that we all love to call home. Thank you.
Lori is next, and after Lori is Carla. And after Carla is Patsy Piperato-Mailer.
Hi, Lori Troy, Macon Corner. Golly gee, you all were so articulate. Thank you so very much. You said everything I was gonna say. Seriously, and then some. But most importantly, I am counting on the land use board to do the right thing. Thank you.
I agree with the previous My name is Patsy Piperato-Mahler. I reside at 1772 County Road 519. I've been here almost 20 years. I'm kind of sure I had something planned, but a lot of people have more quality things to say. Mayor Plumer, something that you said, two things at the last meeting really struck hard with me. First, you recognize that it is your duty to serve this town. I hope we can truly count on your statement. Second, you said that you've never seen a turnout like last week. One thing about our town, like ours, we come together in crisis, and the numbers that stand before you tonight show you this town is experiencing a crisis. I'm confident that each of you that sit here, elected by your fellow neighbors, will rally behind your community and stand together to stop this processing cannabis factory. My name is Patsy Piperato-Mahler, and I oppose this factory anywhere in our town.
And then Michael Boyd is next after Carla.
Hi, I'm Carla Lamandola. I've resided here all my life. I represent my mother, Margaret Lombardo. She's at 400 Macon Corner Road. And we want to thank the board and everyone that has shared all the information and asking the questions that we have all had in our minds. I don't have a prepared speech. I'm a fifth generation Alexandria Township resident. We've always called this God's country. We used to say, shh, don't tell anybody. We wanted to keep it, we want to keep it the way it is now. We do, my mother and I, Margaret, we oppose having a cannabis factory in Alexandria Township. Thank you.
Michael Boyd is next, after that is Naomi Boyd.
Hello, my name is Michael Boyd, Macon Corner Road. In answer to some of the questions that Boyd has raised here, how much water? 40,000 feet can be equivalent to one golf course. In Booton, they went with that and then they tripled the size of their facility. But the same guy who's applying here has his facility in Pennsylvania. He's doubling the size of that. So the water, the facilities grow in size once they're established, once they get their foot in the door, and they use up, the amount of water they use up is equivalent to several golf courses. Is there any difference between medical and recreational marijuana? None. Cultivation and processing is almost always done in the same place. And the smell can travel for 1,500 yards. I've measured it myself for 500 yards. Okay, here's my speech now. Everyone here wears boots, hunting boots, work boots, riding boots, hiking boots. Why? Because we live and work outside. That's what we have in Alexandria. We have fresh air and peace and quiet. Now, remember that, fresh air and peace and quiet. Company says they will bring jobs. What kind of jobs exactly? The job's going to be appropriate for high school or college kids? Is growing marijuana the best thing for a kid to put on their college application? I don't think so. On the plus side, they'd be familiar with the smell of the college dorm. Let's look at what a few of Mr. Goldbrad's employees have to say about these jobs. And these are direct quotes from his employees. Management was beyond awful. This company is full of false promises and deceptions. They have no idea what they are doing. They used illegal chemicals, and working conditions are unsafe. Every storefront and business around here already has help wanted signs outside. There are plenty of good job opportunities here in town, and the money would stay in town and not end up in the tax-sheltered fund of a Long Island multimillionaire. Mr. Goldrath is a hedge fund manager who lives in the Hamptons. He's not going to live here or raise his kids here. We can look at Reddington and what happened there. One resident said when the fans go on at 2:30 in the morning, it sounds like tractor trailer trucks. And he had to buy an industrial air scrubber for his own house. What did the mayor say? Citizens can call the appropriate agency. They did, and the DEP fined the Reddington facility $1,500. Fines don't work. So that's not going to work. Let's talk about an industrial zone, but it would have to be big enough to keep noises, lights, and smell away from people's homes. So I've made a map that shows every property that is at least 1 mile wide. Here it is. Oh, it doesn't exist because there are no properties that big. Okay, so for the board members, I'll finish up here. Have you visited a facility? I visited 3. Here's a tip. Don't park anywhere near it and don't wear clothes that you care about. Have you researched what is really involved in the growing and processing, manufacturing of marijuana? I have. Have you read the newspaper articles and court proceedings? I have. Have you looked at Altus's product line? Have you sampled it? I have not. If you look at their website, they sell gummies, mints, and tarts. These are quotes for ritual and daily lifestyle needs and products for enhancing life experiences, special occasions, or just hanging out. It does not sound medicinal to me. So, everyone knows what our town seal looks like. It's an oval, and there's farms on the left and there's houses on the right. Is it now going to show marijuana factories in the middle with a cloud of stench over everything? I don't want that. My daughter is going to speak next because she is going to, it's our sons and daughters who are going to be impacted by the decisions that are made here. Thank you.
Everybody, if we want to be fair to everybody, we have to try and keep it limited to the 3. A couple of them are starting to go over, and I don't want to disappoint anybody. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Naomi Boyd. I'm Michael Boyd's daughter. Yesterday I was on Route 91 in Western Massachusetts, and I counted 14 marijuana shops in 28 miles. That's a storefront every 2 miles. Check Google Maps if you don't believe me. Is that what we want this area to look like? Do we want to become known as the cannabis capital of Huntington County? Hershey, Pennsylvania smells like chocolate. Freehold used to smell like Nescafe. Bergen County smells like, well... what will Alexandria Township smell like? People choose where they're going to live by a town's reputation. People want to live in towns that have opted out of the cannabis business. The value of every single property will be affected because there will always be the potential of being within range of a future facility. There are only 3 states left where marijuana is completely illegal. It is inevitable that it will be legalized at the national level at some point. In August, New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission issued rules so that they can begin licensing cultivators, manufacturers, retailers, and distributors of recreational marijuana. Once that starts, demand will skyrocket and Alexandria Township will be targeted by producers trying to cut corners and maximize profits. Is that what we really want? In my house, the floors are dented and scraped with centuries of boot marks. When I come home at the end of the day, I add my own marks to those floors. And then I think about the people who laid those boards down more than 200 years ago. And I honor their legacy by going back outside to work some more in the fresh air and the peace and quiet. Thank you.
Richard is Alfred Keel.
Good evening, members of the Land Use Board. My name is Richard Phillips, and I'm speaking regarding the property located at 28 Airport Road. I attended the meetings on November 8th with the Township Committee. I attended the meetings on December 8th with the Township Committee, and I understand the board tonight, the Land Use Board mentioned a couple issues that I brought up at one of those meetings. I also, before I start, would like to applaud the public members that have spoken, the research they've done in behalf of the township to educate both the other public members here and yourselves in terms of what the impact could be. First, at the township meetings, I asked the questions about the cost-benefit analysis. No answer. What's the impact analysis to the environment? No answer. Is there a resource study? Power requirements, sewer, gas, city water, you mentioned that in your discussion tonight. The real concern I have, 28 Airport Road and the proposed lot 1063, 26 Airport Road. This building is 100 feet off the property line, 400 feet from the house. Their quality of life, you won't be able to sit outside, barbecue, cut grass, enjoy the quiet, open your windows. The local horse farms ride their horses on the property. I don't know how these odors will affect the horses. They probably have to sell the farm if this goes through. I've driven past White House at 50-55 with the windows open on 22 headed eastbound, and I could not clear the car for 2 miles with the windows open. So it really affects, that odor really affects the quality of life in anyone surrounding it. And there are no long-term studies on the odors around these facilities because they're brand new. Regardless of where you place this in Alexandria Township, this facility, where the facility is located, will affect the quality of life and the property values. Thank you very much.
My name is Alfred Kyle, I'm at 7 Smoke Run. I just want to say that if this plant is approved, what you are is approving pollution to the air and water. There's no, I refer from everyone here at the board, the area will be polluted. What I am surprised is that not all of you are on board with the same information. I thought that would have happened. But I want to be that I'm disappointed in what you're seeing in the face of what we have tonight is that at the conclusion of your comments, that you didn't overwhelmingly reject this project altogether.
After John is Mark and Tina Fontana.
My name is John McEldear. First, thank you for serving on this board and caring about our environment and quality of life in Alexandria Township. My wife and I have lived at 385 Meckler Corner Road for 43 years. We're 2/3 of a mile by road from 26 Airport Road, obviously west as the crow flies. Although I'm only maybe half crazed compared to when I came in here tonight from hearing some of the comments you folks have made and the direction you appear to be leaning, it ain't over till it's over as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think these people are going to give up that easily. So I want to address just a few comments still about 26 Airport Road. I think that this was the execution of a well-planned strategy that took place over several years. and required the acquiescence of at least two-thirds of the town council to get us where we are tonight, because we didn't have to be here tonight. This could have been killed a long time ago. Mayor Plummer told us to trust that our long list of concerns, he labeled them fears, would be addressed by you folks. We don't fear the unknown, we fear the known. We've seen the track record of cannabis manufacturing. We've heard the quote, 20 skunks, neighbors flee, fires and explosions destroy buildings, workers and firefighters seriously injured, disasters, complaints, lawsuits and fines from New Jersey to California. Mr. Banish explained it, some very great pre-positioning explanation, thank you. That the planning process provides a basis to permit or not permit, and if permitted, to zone how and where. I assert there is nothing iffy about this. The if should be a firm not permitted anywhere, and therefore no how, no where. To be clear, we are all here firm supporters of farm and open space preservation. A number of you say you fund us to take advantage of that program, and we sincerely thank you for that, because there are over 3,300 acres at Alexandria under preservation. So our sincere thanks for creating that legacy for the greater good of this township. However, just a year ago, the 67 acres at 26 Airport Road went into preservation as part of that multi-year strategy. And now we see the expectation that you should pass an ordinance and then accept a donut hole in the middle of preserved farmland for a pharmaceutical plant. This makes a mockery of farmland preservation and insults all the rest of you. Alexandria needs to draw and defend a line in the sand. Should it come to that, I, for one, would gladly give up a few cents to the municipal tax rate to pay for a lawsuit to preserve our quality of life. I suggest to you and your professional advisors that no number of studies or crafting of stringent regulations will change the fact that any ordinance violates the principles upon which our master plan was created. I didn't think I would ever reach this level of outrage living in this township, but I would say to the Altus representatives, likely here tonight, we don't want you here. We never did. And we never will.
Follow that one. That was bottom.
You got it, Tina.
My name is Tina Fontana, and my husband and I live at 20 Farmhouse Road. We strongly object to the proposed industrial facility in Alexandria and urge you to take prudent and ethical moral actions to preserve this beautiful rural community. We have lived here for 32 years and raised our family here. A major reason we have stayed so long is because of the natural, unspoiled nature of this town. Over the years, we have seen many good decisions made for Alexandria by the township government. Unfortunately, considering building an industrial facility such as this is the polar opposite of what this town is all about. Perhaps the proposal for this facility that you were originally given seemed very attractive at face value, but without the proper investigations into the severely detrimental impact this would have to our community, this ordinance should never have gone this far. Now that you are aware of the facts, we implore you to realize your mistake and reverse this process before it goes any further. If I had more time, I could cite hundreds of reasons why this shouldn't come to be, but instead, I look to several hundred of them in the seats behind me. In closing, my beautiful daughter, Casey, who is a civil and environmental engineer, had this to say, and I quote, and she wishes she could be here, but she lives in Chicago. I always look forward to coming home to Alexandria. I temporarily live in Chicago for my job, but it is so refreshing when I return to Alexandria from the sprawling metropolis of Chicago. This respite from the city means a great deal to me because there is truly no substitute for the unmarred natural beauty of my hometown. The adverse environmental outcomes that such a facility will generate are numerous, and unfortunately, there hasn't been enough research to ensure that my family, wildlife, water, and air will be protected. I ask you to please keep Alexandria industrial free. End quote. God bless beautiful Alexandria.
My name is Chrissy Cope, maiden name Reeve. I live at 89 Mount Salem Road. I grew up around the corner at 426 Meckling Corner Road. We bought the Mahler's house. Mike spoke a little bit about it. Thank you to everyone here for taking the time to go through this decision process. I trust the process and I believe that you will do the right thing. I'm simply up here to voice my opposition to the building of this industrial facility in Alexandria, a place I've called home my entire life. It does not belong here. Thank you.
And to raise my son here. And I just want to go on record to say that I'm against this being built anywhere in Alexandria.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Gunther. I live at 425 Mecklen Corner Road. My 5-year-old is going to be up here, but it's got too late and it's after her bedtime. So speaking on her behalf, all right. So my 5-year-old was going to join, but obviously it became after her bedtime. But speaking on her and my son's behalf, I grew up here. We were excited to raise our family here, and we still are. Listening to you, it sounded like the airport road location is not on the table so much, but I implore you not to also put it at the industrial site. Frenchtown School is right down the road, and if it's not okay for my child, it's not okay for theirs. When you look at this, involve Frenchtown, involve Milford, because we might have to take on a giant, and we can use others to support us. Thank you.
I have a couple things I want to say today. First off, I'm against this anywhere in this country. We've been here for a long time. Anywhere.
Your name?
Joe Preston, 461 Mecklen Corner Road. In terms of your first question, they should be combined. No question. The second one, I don't think anybody has really talked about where this is located. If for some reason it's placed in the industrial center, obviously, on the river, as we just been through Kentucky, these massive storms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What happens when we have another Sandy comes in, and another flood down in Delaware, this facility with all the chemicals, all the product, is it a hazardous waste? What happens to Frenchtown? What happens to Lambertville? New Hope? What are we thinking about this? This just makes no sense. No. Thank you.
Very emotional.
Hold on 1 second. Could you just state your name and your address?
Sure. My name is Carolina Rosa. I live in 18 miles up the road. I am not from here. I was born and raised in Brazil for 20 years. And I moved to the United States for a better opportunity. I became a nurse. I've been a nurse for 4 years. I'm an oncology nurse in Morristown Medical Center. And tomorrow I'm gonna wake up at 5 in the morning and treat 98 patients that have cancer. I treat from young 20-year-olds with lymphoma, one who lives not too far from here. And every day I have to treat them, give them compassion, and watch them die slowly. And this is what your children are gonna be exposed to. And your grandparents and your family members. If this is established here, I came for the American dream. I give a lot to the United States. My full capacity as a nurse, I give to America and my country. I have dual citizenship. I pay taxes here, and I work for our community, okay, and my fellow citizens. And I ask you to consider that, okay? I also have a couple of questions that I took down when I listened to what you had to say. Who will regulate the factory as far as cultivating, processing, and distribution? Is it our job to do that, or is that a federal government or state government that's gonna be taking care of that for us? And who's to know that they're really on our side, right? So what incentive does Altus has to come to a community that has such little infrastructure, right? So they have to put up generators, we don't have good capacity as far as electricity go, we don't have good water supply, so what is behind all that, right? That sounds like really weird. How far from neighbors' homes this is gonna be? Like, other residents had said, like, Frenchtown and other communities are gonna be really close, and they are gonna go into fight with us, because I know that they're probably gonna be against that. And what is the benefit, real benefit to our town to have to go to all through this trouble and all this money, all our taxpayers' money to research for this outsider, for this company, a third party to come establish themselves here? Who's paying for that? I am concerned because I bought a house and I've been investing here, and my home value is gonna go down. According to everybody else's, opinion as well. Because if we allow this company, other companies are gonna come in and the property value is gonna go down. Okay, thank you very much for your opportunity.
Good evening, thank you to the board, Mr. Mayor. Jim Garrett, I live at 20 Rapp Road in Alexandria Township. And I'd like to go on record saying that I do oppose this. And of all the comments and all of the talk that I've heard tonight, I haven't heard one thing that explains the upside of this thing. It all seems to be negative. So, this is my first meeting, and I appreciate y'all being here and volunteering your time. But I just don't understand what the upside to this is. It seems to be mostly negative for our township. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tom Vokes. I live at 437 Mecklen Corner Road. Came here tonight pretty upset, and I feel a little better now from what I've heard and a nice explanation of the land use. But I do have some environmental law blog that I will forward to the board secretary. I think is very informative concerning the chemicals and the waste that this factory. So again, I just want to strongly oppose anywhere in this township. Thank you very much.
Hello. Dave Nardone. I live on 155 Rick Road with my wife and 2 kids. Just want to go on record to say that I strongly oppose this facility. I integrate technology for a living, and I frequently visit a grow facility located in North New Jersey. And when I pull up to that place, the smell when you approach, it nearly knocks you down, especially on a summer day. I just figure since we can't all control the way the wind blows, I strongly oppose the location of a facility like this anywhere in Alexandria Township.
Hello, my name is Dan Simonette. My wife Susan and I have lived at 53 Schoolhouse Road for 11 years. I've worked in the chemical pharmaceutical industry for 40 years in manufacturing and processing plants for major corporations. I'm here to ensure that my fellow Alexandria residents have a clear understanding of the chemical process involved in the extraction of THC from the cannabis plant for use in producing medical marijuana. Let me explain the process. First, the cannabis plants will be grown through indoor hydroponics in an aqueous solution. This part of the process is one concern because chemicals that are hazardous to the environment, such as hydrogen peroxide, are used to minimize mold growth. The solution used to grow the plants has to be constantly refreshed with various fertilizers and large volumes of water brought in by well or trucks, not sprint delivery vans. But that's not the worst part of a medical marijuana facility. What is being proposed here is an industrial plant, not an agricultural greenhouse. It is nothing like a brewery, winery, or garden growers due to the extraction process, which is removing the THC from the cannabis plant with hazardous chemicals, resulting in strong odors, harmful fumes, and hazardous waste. Commonly, the use of highly flammable solvents and hydrocarbons such as propane, butane, methanol, ethanol, or carbon dioxide are used for extracting THC. These chemicals also have an explosive potential and will be stored on-site in outdoor tanks. I've inquired and researched and could not find specifically which process method Altus will be using to extract the THC. Was this information part of Altus' presentation to the town committee? Did anyone inquire as to which chemicals we brought onto this site? The harvested plant is then dried, cleaned, with leaves and buds removed. Then it is saturated with a certain amount of solvent, which will now hold the THC. The part of the plant which was saturated is separated from the solvent, becoming hazardous waste. How will Altus be removing hazardous waste? A drying process in drums? Was this discussed with them? What remains is the dilute THC in solvent. Next, the solvent is completely evaporated to an oil. It is the oil that is then prepared for human consumption in various medical forms. There will be off gases and odors during processing. Apparently, these odors are difficult to control, if not impossible. There are guidelines set by OSHA called odor threshold limits. Depending on the chemical used, some odor is permissible, if deemed non-hazardous at that concentration in the air. As you know, medical marijuana facilities are still fully operating while emitting these horrible odors. During my 40 years of processing chemicals for human medical consumption, I have experienced many spills, leaks, explosions, and gas releases. Usually the company is hit with a small fine, slap on the wrist. Causes for these mishaps can include equipment failure, static discharge, or human error. Who will be working here? Who is being entrusted with these potential accidents or failures? It's hard enough to find workers anywhere these days, but in this industry, they must be highly experienced. This is not a so-called pot farm. This industrial facility has no business in a location like Alexandria Township. I implore the land use board meeting members, who are also our fellow residents, to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I think I'd like to echo, it's fortuitous, I came right after him, a lot of the things he said, because some of the terminology that I've been hearing used of cultivation and harvesting and processing of crops sounds like hay balers in the field and corn combines and silos full of soybeans, which is a little more bucolic than what all of this is. It sounds a little bit more like a refinery, and I think he outlined that pretty well, the way he said it, more like a refinery and then a production facility with manufacturing lines, with all kinds of packaging materials and whatever chemicals are used in the hydraulics for the production of all of that as its package for these gummies and mints that are coming out. That's a long way from a crop that was grown hydroponically or in the field. So it sounds a little bit more like Cargill or something like that to me than it does agriculture. Thank you.
Last name, but it's 10 Mount Salem Road.
Hi, I'm Sue Calarco, and my family resides at 3 Airport Road. There are water concerns, there's sewage concerns, there's electricity concerns, there are odor concerns, there are traffic concerns, there are concerns about the people who will work here, there are security concerns, there are health concerns. 2 schools are around the block from this proposed site. We personally find it stunning that any resident of Alexandria Township would think this is a good idea, let alone the people who are supposed to be representing us. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Linus, 79 Schoolhouse Road. I want to thank the board for your consideration and the good information shared tonight by you folks, as well as the audience here, the public. I'm just here to state on the record that I oppose any kind of cannabis factory anywhere in Alexandria Township. Thank you.
My name is John Jacobson. I live at 10 Mount Salem Road. I've lived in Hunterdon County since 1978 and been a resident of Alexandria Township for the last 26 years. I had a business in Elizabeth, New Jersey. 55 miles from here. I traveled that for 50 years back and forth. And I was so proud to be out in Alexandria Township after leaving Elizabeth with all their factories, and going through Newark, and going through Rawley, just nothing but factories, one after another. They don't belong in Alexandria Township, period. Squash this thing, do the right thing, and be done with it.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Hackett. I live at 2 Mount Salem Road in Alexandria Township. I think all the concerns that I have already been expressed tonight, and quite eloquently. I basically came now to adamantly oppose the construction of a marijuana factory on Airport Road or any other place in Alexandria Township. And I would request that this land use board reject this in total and send that recommendation to the Township Committee to have them formally reject it. It's time that this ends, and it needs to end now without going any further. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your
My name is Nadine Januzis, 351 North Road. Unlike many of the people here, I am not a long-term resident. I'm also very nervous.
We got your back. What? We got your back.
Thank you. My husband and I just moved here in January of this year. We lived in Bayonne. I lived there for over 50 years. And one of the reasons we came here is because what it's like. It's beautiful. It's clean. I breathed pollution for years and years and years. And here I go. Lucky enough to be here. So I just would like to recommend and ask that you do not proceed with this facility for all the people whose history is here. We deserve nothing less. So thank you again for your time.
Hi, my name is Paul Ignacio. I represent a family of 5 who live in 7 Lear Road. Just like many people here, I've prepared a statement collected all my thoughts. I think a lot has been said already, but there's one thing I would like to request, if I may, to direct your attention to that blue wall that's behind you, where it says Delaware Valley Regional High School Cultivating Gold Standards. So I suggest we keep it that way, and we uphold the vision and the beliefs that are posted on these walls. Thank you.
Well said.
My name's Mary Beth Phillips. I live at 11 Smoke Run. I spoke at the Township Committee meeting last week. Just want to reiterate, my husband and I moved here 1 year ago from Middlesex County. We live near an industrial area. We live near 24/7 production. We heard the constant din of industry. We had noises. We had traffic. We moved out here for the peace and quiet. We just retired. We retired out here. We've only been here for a year. I adamantly oppose this cannabis facility anywhere in the township of Alexandria. Please do the right thing and shut this down right now. Thank you.
I got ahead of somebody. Chuck Mangy, 360 Mecklin Corner. I'm a chemical engineer. I built, I've worked in, I run chemical plants. You can never, ever tell the book from the cover. Does anyone have any idea what's going to go on inside this plant? Thank you, I don't either. Some of you may know Maggie Bullion cubes from Nestle. Sweet smelling, nice additives, starts as a white powder, and in between is the most horrific smell you could imagine. We all wore hats. You cannot wash it out of your hair. I worked for IBM. We made computer chips, not just little computer chips. They start out as clean white sand, and in between, chemicals that I doubt even this building has in their best chemical. Corrosive, explosive, toxic. You can't tell the book from the cover. Does anyone know what's going on? My family just sold a big environmental consulting firm in Washington. Minimum price for an environmental impact statement is $500,000. Are we funding that? are they from? Does anyone know? I've learned more from you people tonight than I have from you people. Sorry. I'm not here tonight as other people have to thank you. That sometime, I hope in the future, but not tonight.
Good evening, and thanks again for your service, and thanks for listening to us. It's refreshing to know that you're here to listen to us tonight. So, following up on the last speaker, I don't know what's going to happen in this facility, but I have the good fortune of knowing someone that does know what's going to happen in this facility. Because over this past weekend, I had some friends in from out of town. One of them is a former CEO of a cannabis facility in Canada. And after giving him a brief description of what was coming here, he stopped me and he said, "Dave, you do not want this here. Dave, you do not want this here." That's all I needed to hear. And I couldn't agree with him more. So appreciate you listening. And that's it. Thank you.
My name is Andy Tomlinson, and I live at 364 Mecklin Corner Road. I've been a resident of Alexandria for 16 years. I am strongly opposed to allowing a marijuana growing and processing facility to operate anywhere in Alexandria. These facilities are basically chemical plants, as others have described, but I want to just re-emphasize the point that they use solvents and heat and pressure to extract chemicals from marijuana plants. These facilities belong in large industrial zoned areas that have the infrastructure to support chemical-intensive operations. Areas like that simply don't exist in Alexandria. These facilities certainly do not belong on preserved farmland in a residential neighborhood upstream from nearby schools in a small rural town. These facilities pose a variety of risks, including air, land, and water pollution, as well as the potential for explosions and intense fires, as has previously been noted. And Alexandria simply doesn't have the equipment to handle this in any of its zoning areas. I want to focus on the air pollution and noxious fumes that these facilities generate. If there was an economical way to control these fumes and odors, then Standard Farms and others would already be using it. But given the widespread problem of noxious fumes from marijuana growing and processing facilities, it is clear that there is no easy solution to the problem. Therefore, we should not kid ourselves that ordinances can be written that will actually protect the Alexandria community. If we allow these facilities to operate in Alexandria, we will inevitably end up with violations and the burden of enforcing the ordinances. Alexandria lacks the resources to fight a large and profitable corporation in court. It is a mismatch and we will lose. And frankly, corporate marijuana producers are now seeking to locate in small rural communities looking exactly for this type of mismatch. Please do the right thing and don't let these companies get a foothold in Alexandria. Thank you for your very important service to the community. Our quality of life here depends on it.
Steve Parker, Homestead Farm Road, 30-plus year resident of the township. I just want to add my voice to the chorus of those who are urging the board to reject the proposal. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kim Turner. I live at 64 Schoolhouse Road. I just want to go on the record and say that I oppose this. Me and my husband moved here over 3 years ago. We've started our family. We have 2 young children at home. And I think I'm so blessed to be able to live here in this beautiful, clean environment. And I would like to keep it that way. And I appreciate everyone sitting behind me who's done such amazing research, and I appreciate the discourse between all of you today. And thank you for sitting here after your busy day, and thank you so much.
I wish to extend my thanks to the members of the Land Use Board, my fellow residents of Alexandria, and in particular to Trooper Feldman and Trooper Bell from the Kingwood Barracks for the opportunity tonight to speak and uphold one of Roosevelt's 4 freedoms, that of freedom of speech. I am Paul Bordelesi of 72 Whitehall Road. I have proudly lived on one of the few remaining township dirt roads since my wife and I bought 29 acres from Jack Cahola in 1996 and asked Paul Grief to build us a home. Our 3 boys grew up in that house and ate many lunches in this cafeteria. Many residents have voiced their concern over what this project is. I'm going to take a slightly different tact, and instead, I'm going to discuss what this project isn't. To start with, we all understand that from the perspective of Alexandria's long and successful relationship with agriculture, this project has nothing in common with farming. It does not use the sun, does not use a tractor, does not use dirt. This factory could be built anywhere. It could be built underground. It could be built on an existing Superfund site. It could be built in an old, defunct Walmart. Oh wait, someone's already beaten us for that one. It could be built anywhere. Okay? It does not need to be built on prime farmland, near wetlands, near 3 schools, in the middle of a residential community. And let's not even waste our time discussing how ridiculous it sounds to co-locate marijuana in an airport. One of the more eloquent speakers at the council meeting last week brought up the concept of noble deeds. This is something worth further exploration. Unfortunately, there is nothing noble about this project. There is nothing about this project that will inspire the hearts and souls of the residents of Alexandria. This is not the sort of project that real estate agents are going to bring prospective buyers to come see when evaluating whether to relocate their families to our community. And it is certainly not the type of project that students from Del Val will travel to on their school trips. Or let us hope not. There is nothing about this project that will make Alexandria proud. This alone should be sufficient for us to pause and wonder why we are willing to take on a project that has no support from the community, has nothing that inspires the hearts and souls of the community, but instead benefits only a single person. I am standing on the crest of a tidal wave of community support. Everybody is aware of the one landowner who will be the sole beneficiary for the detriment of his neighbors. Everybody is aware that this one landowner is planning to sell his property and move elsewhere. His time is past. His influence is waning. The community that stands behind me speaks in a unified voice. If this board and the town council do the right thing, this individual and the blight he wishes to visit upon us will quietly fade away.
My name is Christopher Kelp. I live at 18 Alexandria Drive, and I happen to agree with every point that is made by my fellow townspeople regarding this matter. And I do understand the process that our township committee has passed down to this board. The blame doesn't lie with you. Now you're tasked out to create or modify certain ordinances, and I do understand that. In saying that, I urge you, as our fellow residents, to take a good look at the amount of people here tonight. This grassroots objection was put together with a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, and about $100 worth of corrugated plastic. I can't even begin to fathom what this amazing group of residents are capable of doing. This brainless idea has no place in our town. Anywhere. Period. As a board, you are charged with creating ordinances that do affect the entire town, as you rescinded the special agricultural production zones. And if you oppose it in your backyard, oppose it in everyone's backyard. I would argue, where is the line? Where's the line? Where do we draw the line as a community between legal and moral, legal and ethical? As a town, it's important that we keep a clear, concise master plan, and this simply just does not fit it. If the state of New Jersey were to legalize prostitution, would we put a dancing pole in the middle of the jungle gym at Alexandria Park? Probably not, right? We probably wouldn't do that. So why are we even considering putting a legit chemical factory in the middle of God's country? Let's not forget, under the Controlled Substances Act, cannabis production on the federal level is illegal. And that's where it hits me personally, because I actually signed on the dotted line and served 5 years in the Marine Corps. I hope that this go-around, the answer to water is not that we're going to test wells within 1,000 feet of residences. I hope we actually do our due diligence this time when we look into this issue. My main concern for me, other than everyone else's concern, is security. While in the Marine Corps, I served 13 months at the White House. I traveled all around the country as President Bush's advance party. I served as an infantry squad leader with 3rd Battalion, 6 Marines. And now, I'm a contract compliance officer for over $140 million worth of federal contracts. I know a thing or two about security. Having warm-bodied armed guards with ballards and chain link fences is not gonna keep people out. Delivering cannabis in Amazon-like vans. Have you ever heard of anything called theft in transit? Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your service. Do the right thing.
Terry Barker, 412 Macklin Road, and then Larry Campbell, and after that is Diane Sniffen.
Hey everybody, and thank you for your opportunity to speak in front of everybody and the board meeting for us to learn about what's going on in our township. I came out here almost 22 years ago. I remember driving out here with my wife and like, people were waving to us. And I got a flat tire. My car on fire or something? I'm not used to this. So it was a great community. So we moved out here. I live at 412 Macklin Road, right around the corner from Airport Road. Lovely place. We've been here 22 years. My biggest concern is, we're going to put a chemical factory near an airport. We're going to transport drugs, possibility, all over the country. We don't really want that. For Alexandria to be #1 drug capital of the country. That's one concern. Second concern would be, just to keep our community the way it is. We go to recycling, we keep our garbage clean, we keep everything very nice and neat. The parks are clean, don't have to clean them all. Really nice. Why would we even try to adopt this plan? So I oppose it, and I would like to kill the plan completely. For example.
sitting in the back of the room listening to everybody all night. Bottom line is, I'm aware this ordinance and this whole issue is in its infancy. You're listening to everybody. You see, everyone is concerned. But myself, I'm aware that there are certain legal procedures you have to do, or it's gonna come back and bite you in the ass later, and this whole township. I believe myself, I didn't sign the petition, only because I don't think you should close the door completely. There's an industrial section. There was a factory down there for years. There are other issues a lot of people don't know. I've been told this is a size issue too. There can also be mini grows that less than 10 people would work there. I met a guy in the back of the room when I came in. He works at the place in Redington. I didn't smell him, but he says he smells. And there's 140 people that work there. I asked him, how many people work there? He said 140 people. This is something that you folks are gonna have to control. I don't know if this board sat years ago when an airport showed up in my present backyard, but maybe if you all sat here, I wouldn't have airplanes flying over my house every day or crashing in the woods behind the house every once in a blue moon. But I believe you folks will take care of it, do what you need to do, legally, officially, and that's the way I feel. Thank you very much.
And then Ashley Kelk.
Yes, hi.
Diane, I'm gonna interrupt you one second. Okay, we had planned on this stopping at 9:45 because of our time limitations. We still have a number of people that want to make comments, so we're gonna let it run till 10 o'clock, and then we're gonna continue with the January meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I won't be long. I'm Diane Sniffen. I'm gonna speak for myself and Charles, my husband, so the next person can go. I want to thank you for taking all this time to listen to all of our concerns. Charles and I has the same exact concerns as everybody else in Alexandria, and this just doesn't make sense why we would even consider putting a medical cannabis factory in our neighborhood. Thank you very much for listening.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Kelp. I live at 18 Alexandria Drive, Pittstown, New Jersey. I'm obligated to disclose that my views do not represent those of Atlantic Health. First, I want to thank each of you for being here. It's late and we have so many people from our community coming together to try and resolve something. I'm a mother, and I'm also here to advocate on their behalf because their voices are too small. Just because something was voted on or is legal does not mean that it will do no harm. Some incidents documented and reported include 7 shot dead in California marijuana factory massacre by Newsweek. Does this mean that Alexandria is going to have armed guards and barbed wire surrounding these facilities? That's something we have never had before. And this is also a new thing that has been brought to our country. So when you look over at California and what they are dealing with, we should utilize that as part of our research to make this decision. Residents nearby Carpinteria Valley in California had incorporated odor control systems as part of their land use permits. Casey Roberts stated that every day you get that scratchy throat, residents said that the irritant makes their eyes water and it feels like their chest is tightening. Do we truly have the evidence-based research to know what the long-term effects are going to be on our bodies? Some people have moved to this area for the fact that it is quiet, low traffic, and that is why they decided to go to Alexandria Township. I often think about the mothers or fathers that have an autistic child. What if they moved here because it was low stimuli? Now you're gonna bring light, noise, generators to this little town. I read one woman said that she could not sell her house for 3 years Again, this is all things that we can find in California. The last thing is I do want to make sure I'm giving the person behind me enough time. I spent months holding the hand of individuals passing away. They were alone, without their family, and oftentimes said that they wanted to be home. I'm asking you not to change my home. I wore it in 95 for 6-7 months, and I don't want to wear one in my backyard. So please help me advocate on behalf of my children. Thank you for your time.
My name is William Wigan, 8 Jeremiah Lane, Pittstown, New Jersey. I'm speaking on behalf of my whole entire family and my wife. We lived in Rahway. We only moved out here about 4 years ago. I sold everything I had to come out here and live the American dream. Get away from the noise and all the factories. Merck, Exxon, the noise was unbearable, the dirt, the smell. I packed up everything to come out here and take care of my 6 children and take care of my father. Every day I drive home, it's like a reward. Coming out over the top of the hill, seeing the sunset, smelling the cows, hearing all that, watching the horses run through the fields, and I don't want that ruined. That's all I gotta say.
I'm Karen Leff, 458 Mecklen Corner Road. Carol and I thought we were signing a petition, sorry.
After that, I'm sorry, it's
I'll
Joseph.
be quick here. You ever go on vacation or run into people when you're not in Jersey and they find out where you're from? And people's, viewpoint of New Jersey is laughable when they go to the Garden State, right? And what do you tell them? You think about where you're from, right? No, you don't understand, it's beautiful. It's 6 miles to a grocery store, 3 miles to the closest stoplight. It's twisty up and down roads, it's farms, it's horse farms, it's rural, there's a few subdivisions, it's beautiful, right? So I think we all have pride when you hear how people disparage New Jersey. This is a beautiful area of the country. The other thing I want to say is my children. So kids get it. So first response was like, what? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Next kid, how could you possibly want to put something like that in Alexandria? It makes no sense. The youngest, that's just stupid, right? So I know you guys volunteered your time, and I'm thankful for that. I respect that. I know a few of you personally respect you, but I oppose this, and I really hope it goes away. Thank you.
My name is Joseph Fleming at 204 Rick Road. My wife and I moved here in 2015. We had been looking to move out of our home in South Orange for over a decade, and when we found 204, it's tucked into the Swift Farm. It's a very, very small stewardship forest, which we assume responsibilities for. And we just love it. I'm hoping that I live the rest of my years here in Alexandria because of what this community and what this populace has done for generations. And so I applaud you for your volunteerism, for what you've done for this community, because that's what I wanted to come to. The one thing I want to say, I oppose this facility with all my heart. I've been a consulting engineer for 47 years. I'm a licensed professional engineer, licensed professional planner, and I assure you, as you look at ordinances and everything else, many of the communities for which I am the engineer of record for things all over the tri-state area, many communities will simply rely upon the DEP or the county or some other agency. You can't do that. The DEP is understaffed. The DEP has no ability to really enforce the things that you may think you can pass off to them. You can't. The water, this project will require at least 100,000 gallons of water on a daily basis. That's a major DEP permit. If they violate it, you are in no position, we are in no position to even evaluate that. The wastewater discharge We can't monitor that. That's beyond our capacity. So I implore you to stop this dead at the proposed location by the airport and even the industrial zone. It was mentioned before about the potential for increased rainfall. It's happening. I have had major impacts here and throughout the entire state. We are seeing intensified rainfall growing at an alarming rate across the state. For those who don't recognize it, that's pretty sad, but that's what's going to happen. So in your industrial zone, you have major flood areas, and that's going to be major vulnerability. There's no way to make that resilient or sustainable for a facility that is so dangerous as this. Time's up. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Julie Lyons, and I'm a 20-year Alexandria resident on Hickory Corner Road. Here to state my strong, I can't possibly say it any more strongly, opposition in all forms to any cannabis facility in New Jersey. In our township especially, we have an opportunity right now to say no to these factories. What we do here in Alexandria counts. It will lead the way and set a precedent for Holland Township, which is less than a mile from where I am, about a block to be honest. It is going to set a precedent for Milford, Frenchtown, Kingwood, all the sending districts. We are being actively pursued now that the recreational marijuana has been approved by the state. These companies that have cannabis, they are coming here to set their factories up because they think we don't care. They think we're too dumb. I still haven't seen anything in my mailbox that said, hey, guess what? There's a meeting tonight going on at the school. Nothing. Nobody told us. Nobody from the township committee reached out to me personally and said, hey, there's something happening. It's kind of a big deal. Maybe the town should know. The only reason we're here is a few people got together on Facebook, spread the word, got together, made some signs, told their neighbors, told their friends, came together. 75% of people are afraid of public speaking, and you've had us run the clock out on you now. What does that say to how we feel? I'm still waiting for someone, and they said I'm the last, to come out in favor of this. Please do the right thing, and this was something that was really, to me, the most useful that happened at the last meeting. If everyone behind me could raise your hand if you are against any form of medical or recreational or any kind of cannabis factory in Alexandria or anywhere in Hunterdon, raise your hand. Anyone in favor? Thank you.
Okay, well, that concludes our public comment. And really appreciate the input.
I'm sorry. I'll be really fast and apologize for talking so quickly. My name is Linda Trilone. I live at 62 Brick Road, and I'm a homeowner, obviously. I work for Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate, and I just want to, as a real estate professional, state how I'm opposed to this due to how it's going to negatively impact all of our property values. So I stand here for all of my neighbors to try to protect that for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, so now we've completed the public comment section of this. I want to thank you all for coming out, and we heard what you said. I think everybody on board heard what you said. You sought to continue the process, and David, I think that maybe you, based on the conversation that we had and what you heard everybody say, at least start to rough something out that we can take a look at the January meeting.
Understood, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks again for coming, guys. Have a good evening. And we cannot have a vote. First of all, we're past the time limit, the school wants us out of here, and we have other things to discuss in regards to what are we voting on? I have to have everything in order to be able to vote. As I said before, please be patient, we're gonna get through this. I'll entertain the motion to adjourn this meeting.